Hi, this is Ruth Kime, and we are now continuing in our series on the Antichrist. And so tonight, what we're going to be talking about is um, it is something that is a little complicated and it's a lot to try to get in your mind. So I'm going to go over our conclusion first, then I'm going to prove it, and then I'm going to go over the conclusion again. Then whenever I do the next part of this presentation, I'm going to show you in Revelation the same similar groupings, and I'm going to do the same format so that hopefully once you see it 4 times, you will hopefully have a better understanding. So, actually, Mary, do you have, for the PowerPoint, do you have the background that has the kings and shows those succession of how the king? There we go. Okay, so as I read, I'm going to show you, and Mary's going to use the mouse, and wherever the mouse is the one I'm talking about first. So what's going to happen first to start the series of events that brings in the Antichrist? So the point of the topic tonight is what does the world look like as far as the rulers, and what is going to happen in the world as far as rulers go right before the Antichrist comes and as the Antichrist comes. So where does he come from, and what kind of, if you were imagining like a chess game, what pieces are going to move in what direction before the Antichrist comes on the scene. So we're going to start with the ram. So if you see where the little mouse is, the ram is the king that has a crown with 2 parts. Okay, so we're going to talk about him first. That is what happens first. The first part to move is the ram. Near the end of time, the area of Iran, so it's that Middle Eastern area there of Iran, will rise to power 2 times. The second time will be greater than the first time. Okay? Now, in response to this ram, which is going to, it's actually going to push north, west, and south. In response to the second time that it rises, a goat is what it's called, a king represented by a goat is going to come from the west. A Western country will have its first king. So it's a country that already exists that doesn't have kings yet, but it will have its first succession of kings, its first king, that is, who will be an arrogant man. He will become even greater after he destroys this Iranian ram. Okay, so this Western country will come from across the face of the entire earth without touching the ground and will destroy the entire Iranian area. Okay, so that is the first part that we're going to see take place. Okay, now from that kingdom of the goat, okay, that goat, whoever that king is, we're just going to call him a king, that first king of that nation will only be very great for a short amount of time, and then he will be broken. I'm not sure exactly what broken means, but he will be broken. I don't know if he dies or what, but he will be broken. That's the word it uses. In the place of this Western king, there will be 4 regions of power in the world. 7 kingdoms. Because the third one, that's the one that's purple right here. Look at the mouse where it's going to be purple. That particular region is going to have 4 kings within it. So that's where you get 7. Okay, so it's 4 regions. But one of the regions has 4 parts to it. Okay. From the strongest region, which will actually be the one on the far right, from that strongest region will come 10 rulers that are not yet kings, but they act as though they are kings. So they don't have a kingdom, and they're not kings at first, but they rule and have authority as if they were kings. Okay? From among them, the Antichrist will come. Okay? So the cursor is now, the little mouse is now showing the Antichrist. So he's going to come up from among them. When he rises to power, the 10 kings, along with the Antichrist, are going to destroy Mystery Babylon. I'm going to do an entire lesson on Mystery Babylon, but not tonight. Okay. The Antichrist will be arrogant, ruthless, intriguing, different than any other, deceitful. He will oppress and wear out the Christians. He will be worshipped for rising from a deadly head wound. He will seem like a savior hero, rule for 3.5 years of total power. These 10 kings will actually, once they have destroyed Babylon, Mystery Babylon together with the Antichrist, they will give all of their power to the Antichrist, and he will reign completely with sole power over the entire earth, complete globalism, for 3.5 years. Okay. So now we're going to move on to our PowerPoint, and I'm going to show you everything I just said from Scripture. And then at the very end, we're going to go back over what I just said, just so that hopefully you can understand what I'm saying, and it will be clear. Okay. So everyone turn in your Bibles to Daniel chapter 8. So Daniel chapter 8. We are going to do Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 7. But Daniel chapter 8 is a different vision than Daniel chapter 7. And Daniel chapter 8 actually occurs in time first. Daniel chapter 7 occurs later in time. Okay? And I will seek to show you that as we go through the passage. So that's why we're going to start with Daniel chapter 8 and then go to Daniel chapter 7. So, okay, in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that had appeared to me earlier. I saw in the vision, as I started to watch, I was in the fortress city of Susa, in the province of Elam. I saw in the vision that I was beside the Ulai Canal. I looked up, this is verse 3, I looked up and there was a ram standing beside the canal. He had 2 horns. The 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other. The one longer came up last. So if you remember that I said, so the horns represent powers or kingdoms. Okay. So that crown on his head represents that they've got 2 pushes of power. Okay. And the one that is the longer, that's even stronger, comes up last. Okay, so we just saw that in verse 3. Verse 4. I saw the ram charging to the west and the north and the south. So that's those arrows. You see how I have the arrows going up, down, and to the west? Okay, that's the way this Iranian area, it's the area of Iran, okay, that is the way they're going to push, okay, their power. They're going to take over countries in those regions. No animal could stand before him, and there was no rescue from his power. He did whatever he wanted and became great. So this Iranian group becomes very great, and no one stops him, at least for some amount of time. Okay, so now we're going to go to the goat, the response to this Iranian power. Verse 5. As I was observing, a male goat appeared, coming from the west, across the surface of the entire earth without touching the ground. So to fill in your blanks, the first king of a country to the west attacks Iran. The attack comes from across the surface of the entire earth without touching the ground. Okay? We'll keep going. The goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came toward the two-horned ram I had seen standing on the canal and rushed at him with savage fury. I saw him approach the ram, and infuriated with him, he struck the ram, breaking his two horns, and the ram was not strong enough to stand against him. The goat threw him to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one to rescue the ram from his power. So this Iranian area becomes destroyed. The male goat acted even more arrogantly. So this king, this first king of this nation that already existed, now is more arrogant than he was before. So he was already in power, but now he becomes great and he gets even more arrogant than he talked before. He already did talk arrogantly, now he talks more arrogantly. Then the male goat acted even more arrogantly, but when he became powerful, the large horn was broken. 4, now we're going to go to the 4 that come in his place. 4 conspicuous horns, which remember, horns is talking about kingdoms or powers or kings. That's what it always refers to in scripture. 4 conspicuous horns came up in its place, pointing toward the 4 winds of heaven. So that's how when it says pointing towards the 4 winds of heaven is how we know that it's spread out around the whole world. So the world now is controlled by these 4, it's basically 4 regions, but 7 kings. Okay? All right. Now, we are going to stop right there, and I'm going to show you there is an interpretation to this dream, and we're going to go read the interpretation so that we don't get confused. So just pause right there at verse 8, and we're going to skip down to verse 17, just for some context. So now he's being given an interpretation for the dream, Daniel is, okay? So he approached me where I was standing. When he came near, I was terrified and fell face down. Son of man, he said to me, understand the vision refers to the time of the end. Actually, I feel like we need more context. I'm going to go back to verse 15. While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there stood before me someone who appeared to be a man. I heard a human voice calling from the middle of the Uli, Gabriel, explain the vision to this man. So it's the angel Gabriel, and he is being told to explain the vision to Daniel. So I just wanted you to see where I'm getting the fact that this is an explanation for the dream. Okay. So he's terrified. Daniel is terrified. He falls face down, and Gabriel then starts speaking to Daniel. Son of man, he said to me, understand that this vision refers to the time of the end. This is a very important point. When the Bible talks about the time of the end, it's meaning the time of the end, end times, okay? Verse 18, while he was speaking to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Then he touched me and made me stand up and said, I am here to tell you what will happen at the conclusion of the time of wrath, because it refers to the appointed time of the end. Okay, so what it means the conclusion of the time of wrath, is meaning that all of these events that he's explaining is what leads up to, and he explains even to, the destruction of the Antichrist, the destruction of the Antichrist kingdom, and all of God's wrath being poured out. We will see that it gets all the way to that in the vision, okay? So it's going to describe, the vision goes all the way to the end. Okay. Verse 20. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. That's how we know that it's the Iranian kingdom. That's just in case you were wondering, well, how do you know it's the power? How does the ram represent Iran? It's because that's where the Media and Persia, and that's where they come from, okay? So it's that region of the world. Okay, verse 21. The shaggy goat represents the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes represents the first king. Okay, so that word Greece, the king of Greece, in the actual Hebrew is Yavin. It's the son of Yavin. It's one of the descendants of Yavin, which is one of the descendants of Japheth. So Ham, Shem, and Japheth, Noah's three sons. Japheth, from Japheth actually came the kingdom of Greece, which is kind of this whole Western over here, our whole Western way of life and living is very Greek, and so that's why they translate it that way, but the actual word is a son of Yavin. So one of that Japheth's line, Yavin, and the people groups that came from him. Okay. All right, so let's keep going. So it represents the first king. Verse 22. The four horns that took the place of the broken horn represents four kingdoms. So remember how I said that horns represents kingdoms, okay? All right. They will rise from that nation. So from what nation will the four kingdoms rise from? They will rise from that nation with that first king that is a descendant of Yahweh. Okay? All right. They will rise from that nation, but without its power. So they will not be as powerful as that nation. Okay? That had that first king. So it's a nation that already existed, and it's going to have a first king. And then once that king is broken, four will come up, but they'll be spread across the earth, but they will not be as powerful as that nation they came from. Okay. So verse 23, near the end of their kingdom, that's the four, near the end of their kingdom, when the rebels have reached the full measure of their sin, a ruthless king, skilled in intrigue, will come to the throne. Now that's the Antichrist. So we're going to pause right there because I just wanted to read up to the four kingdoms and then read the interpretation of it. Okay. So to fill in your blanks, a ruthless king will come. All right, and you just saw that this ruthless king comes after these four kingdoms have come to their full measure of sin. They're called rebels, interestingly. These four, regions are called rebels, which I'm thinking has got to be very intentionally calling them rebels. What are they rebelling from? But yet they have leadership, but it seems like in a rebellious way of some sort. Like perhaps they didn't come by that without some sort of rebellion of some sort. Okay. So let's go further in the slide. Show the next page, page. Okay, now we're going to talk about the ruthless king. Okay, so a ruthless king, skilled in intrigue, which means understanding. Okay, he will come to the throne. His power will be great, but not his own. This is verse 24. I'm just reading right along. He will cause outrageous destruction and succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the powerful along with the holy people. which I didn't actually put in your notes. You might want to put that as a side note. He will destroy the powerful people of the earth and the holy people of the earth, the Christians, okay? And he will cause outrageous destruction. And whatever he desires to do, he's going to do it, okay? He will cause deceit, this is verse 25, he will cause deceit to prosper through his cunning and by his influence. In his own mind, he will exalt himself. He will destroy many in a time of peace. That is a very important. Point 5 is very important. He will destroy many in a time of peace. It's very interesting because how do you destroy and how do you do that in a time of peace unless you have destruction? I mean not destruction. I meant unless you have deceit. So he's able to deceive people that there's actually peace, even though he's destroying in a huge amount. Now, I don't know what kind of destruction. You can certainly destroy people in different ways. It could mean to kill. It could mean to ruin. It could mean to bring harm, to wear them out, to ruin their reputation, to take from them, who I don't know, or maybe a mixture of all of those. Okay, so let's go to the next page on the PowerPoint. Okay, he will stand against the archangel. Okay, so to do this, we're going to go back to verse 9. So we're going to go back to before the interpretation. It's still Daniel chapter 8, but verse 9. So we're going to go back and get some more information. We're going to leave the interpretation for now and go back to the dream. Verse 9. From one of them, that's from one of the 4 horns, right? So from one of the 4 groups, that's what verse 9 is talking about. So the context was the 4, remember the 4 regions. So from one of the 4 regions will come this little horn, which is the Antichrist. He's called that in multiple places. That's another name for the Antichrist. From one of them, the little horn emerged and grew exceedingly toward the south and the east and toward the beautiful land. It grew as high as the heavenly army. Whoa. Made some of the army and some of the stars fall to the earth and trampled them. It acted arrogantly even against the prince of the heavenly army. Okay. It revoked his regular sacrifice and overthrew the place of his sanctuary. In the rebellion, the army was given up together with the regular sacrifice. The horn threw truth to the ground and was successful in what it did. Wow. Okay, so let's just stop and fill in some blanks. So the Antichrist is actually going to reach to some capacity into the heavens, so much so that he goes against Michael, who is the prince of the heavenly army, the prince of the angels, right? So he is going to do some pretty amazing things in front of all the earth. Okay, so point 9, from Iran rising to the power from the Iran rising in power to the sanctuary restored. Let's look at verse let's keep going. Where do we leave off? Let's see. Verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the speaker, how long will the events of this vision last? The regular sacrifice, the rebellion that makes desolate, which is the abomination of desolation, and the giving over of the sanctuary to the army to be trampled, of the army to be trampled. Verse 14. He said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be restored. And that is 6+ years. So it's a little more than 6 years, or quite a bit, actually more than 6 years of time. So he actually says, how long are the events of this vision? So there are other places in the Bible that talks about some time frames. I'm going to show you one of them. Daniel chapter 12, verse 11 says, from the time the daily sacrifice is abolished, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Happy is the one who waits for and reaches 1,335 days. Okay, so there's some time frames. So you can see that that is clearly less time and that's talking about the abomination. So when the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination is done, that's more like the 3.5 year frame. Whereas this vision is 6+ years. So that is why I believe, and I could be, this is just what I would take it to mean. I'm not going to be real hardcore on this, but I do believe that the difference is in those time frames is this particular vision includes the rising of the ram, the goat annihilating the ram, the Iranian, Median, Persian area, okay, and then the goat rising in power, so the king rising in power, that first king, and then the 4 coming from him, from that region when it's broken, and then the Antichrist coming. Those 10 come, those 10 kings, they give the power, they destroy, Mystery Babylon, together, the Antichrist and those 10 kings, and then those kings give all the power to the Antichrist, and then we have the end. Okay, so this vision includes a lot more information. All right, so it's more time. It's like 6+ years. Okay, I did the math. I think it's like 6.7 or something. You could do the math yourself exactly how many days. 2,300 days, how many years that is. And remember that you have to go by the Hebrew calendar, which is 360 days in a year instead of 365 like us. So make sure you calculate that in when you do your research on that. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All right, so we will get into Daniel chapter 7. We're going to basically go over the same thing as we just went over, but with different details. Actually, before we start with Daniel chapter 7, let me conclude Daniel chapter 8 right here. Daniel chapter 8, verse 25, and I'm going to start with, he will destroy many in a time of peace. He will even stand against the prince of princes, yet he will be broken, not by human hands. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been told is true. Now you are to seal up the vision because it refers to many days in the future. I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for days, and I got up and went about the king's business. I was greatly disturbed by the vision and could not understand it. Okay, I think one of the reasons why he couldn't understand it, even though he just got an interpretation of it, is because, remember, it's sealed until the time of the end. We learn that in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, and then again in verse 9 and 10. Okay, so let's go to Daniel chapter 9. I mean, not 9, sorry, Daniel chapter 7. Okay, so in Daniel chapter 7, there is no mention of the ram or that first king, the goat, that's represented by the goat. It starts with the 4 regions, okay? So that is why if you look up at the very top of the PowerPoint, you're going to see those 4, okay? So that's where Daniel chapter 7 picks up. Okay, so Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of King Belshazzar of Babylon, Daniel had a dream in the visions of his mind. As he was laying in his bed, he wrote down the dream, and here is the summary of his account. Daniel said, in my vision at night, I was watching, and suddenly the four winds of heaven stirred up the great sea. Four huge beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. So these four regions are different from each other. Now it's going to describe, starting with verse 4, what each region is like. The first was like a lion, but had eagle's wings. I continued watching until its wings were torn off. It was lifted up from the ground, set on its feet like a man, and given a human mind. Okay, now verse 5 is going to tell us about the second region. So if you look up at your PowerPoint, we just did the blue. Now we're going to go to the green. The Bible doesn't give it a color. That's just us giving it a distinction that it's different. And I'm helping you to understand what we're talking about next. So number 2 is the green kingdom or region. Suddenly another beast appeared, and a second one that looked like a bear. It was raised up on one side with 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It was told, get up, gorge yourself on flesh. Okay. Now, in the next PowerPoint slide, we're going to see what we have is the pink kingdom up there. And let's read about that one. While I was watching, suddenly another beast appeared. It was like a leopard, 4 wings of a bird on its back, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. It had 4 heads and was given dominion. Okay. Now we're going to look at the orange kingdom at verse 7. After this, while I was watching in the night vision, suddenly a 4th beast appeared, frightening and dreadful and incredibly strong, with large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed, and it trampled with its feet whatever was left. It was different from all the beasts before it, and it had 10 horns. Okay. While I was considering the horns, suddenly another horn. Actually, we're going to pause right there because we want to go get the interpretation once again. Mary, could you show the next PowerPoint so I make sure I don't get ahead? Okay. I guess I will go on because I can see that's what I did in the PowerPoint. So we are going to keep going here. 10 horns, verse 8. While I was considering the horns, suddenly another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. Okay, so 10 kings came from that 4th kingdom. Let me go back and show you that. In verse 7, at the very end, it says, it was different from all the other beasts before it, and it had 10 horns. So that's these 10 kings. Remember, horns represents kings or kingdoms. Okay? So from the 4th region, one of those 4 regions is going to be the most dreadful, the most strong, the most terrifying, and very different than the other 3. Okay? Even though they're all 4 different from each other, this one's going to be different actually than any kingdom seems like in the entire world has ever been. And from that 4th one will come 10 kings that they rule as kings, but they don't have a kingdom, so they're not actual kings, but we're calling them kings because they rule as if they are kings. Okay, that's why I'm calling them that, just to make it easier. Okay, the 3 kings become, Mary, could you fill in that blank for number 2? Yeah, become subdued by the Antichrist. So 3, if you look up at the top of the PowerPoint, you're going to see 3 of these 10 kings over to the side. And that's because those 3 are going to be subdued when the Antichrist comes to power from among these 10. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. When the Antichrist comes from these 10 kings or rulers, 3 of them will be subdued. Okay? All right. Let's keep going in verse 8 near the end. And suddenly, in this horn, there were eyes like the eyes of a human and a mouth that was speaking arrogantly. Now that's describing the Antichrist. As I kept watching, now I'm going to keep reading in verse 9, even though a lot of this information that I'm going to read is not in the PowerPoint, but it's just because it's really good to read the end and how the Lord is going to come back and he's going to destroy the Antichrist. So remember, the King of Kings is going to win. Okay, as I kept watching, there were thrones set in place, and the Ancient of Days, that's Jesus, took his throne. God. His clothing was white like snow, and the hair on his head was like whitest wool. His throne was flaming fire. Its wheels were blazing fire. A river of fire was coming out from his presence. Thousands upon thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The courts were convened, and the books were opened. Verse 11, I watched then, because the sound of the arrogant words of the horn was speaking. As I continued watching, the beast was killed and its body destroyed and given over to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts and their dominion was removed, but an extension of their life was granted to them for a certain period of time. I continued watching in the night visions, and suddenly one like the Son of Man was coming with the clouds of heaven. He appeared, and he approached the Ancient of Days and was escorted before him. So the Ancient of Days is God the Father. All right, that I called him Jesus at the beginning. Jesus comes before God the Father. Okay. He approached the Ancient of Days and was escorted before him, and he was given dominion and glory, a kingdom, so that those of every people, nation, language should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is the one that will not be destroyed. So that's Jesus' kingdom. Okay, so this shows the destruction of the Antichrist and all these kings. Okay, so these 4 regions, these 7, okay, these 7 kings, they will actually still be in existence when the Messiah comes back, when Jesus comes back, and he will destroy the Antichrist. But those other kings, even though they will be taken, their power will be taken away, they will be given an extension of life. Okay, so it said that. And so that's important to know, because those 7 are then different than those 10 kings. So the 10 kings that we saw and 3 are subdued, and you'd be like, oh, well, maybe that's the 7. No, because those 7 are done away with when they give all their power to the Antichrist. But these 4 regions with the 7 heads, they're still here when Jesus comes back. Okay, hopefully that's not too confusing. Okay, so let's go with the little horn. The little horn, or the Antichrist, comes from the 10 kings. 3 of the kings are uprooted before the Antichrist. Point 3, the Antichrist speaks arrogantly against the Most High. Okay, next PowerPoint. Okay, now what we're going to do is go and we're going to read over the interpretation of the vision, because we read all of the vision, and now we're going to read the interpretation of the vision, and then we'll come back and fill up some of these blanks. Okay, verse 15. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was deeply distressed within me, and the visions in my mind terrified me. I approached those who were standing by him and asked to clarify all this. He said, so he let me know the interpretation of these things. Verse 17. These huge beasts, 4 in number, are 4 kings who rise up from the earth. But the holy ones of the Most High will receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. That's a super short interpretation that is given to Daniel. He's like, these 4 kings, these are the 4 kings, but they're going to be overcome and Jesus is going to reign forever and ever. And then Daniel wants more of an explanation. Like, wait a minute, I have more questions. So verse 19. Then I wanted to be clear about the 4 beasts, the one different from all the others, extremely terrifying, with iron teeth and bronze claws, devouring and crushing and trampling with its feet whatever was left. Verse 20. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up after the 3 fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke arrogantly and looked bigger than the others. As I was watching, this horn waged war against the holy ones and was prevailing against them. We know the Antichrist is going to do that. Verse 22, until the Ancients of Days arrived and a judgment was given in favor of the holy ones of the Most High, for the time had come and the holy ones took possession of the kingdom. Verse 23, this is what he said. Now, this is an interpretation. Pay real close attention here to the end. The 4th beast, okay, so the 4th beast, remember the 4 regions, the fourth beast will be a 4th kingdom on the earth, different from all other kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth. Think about that. That's actually very terrifying to hear. Trample it down and crush it. Verse 24. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will rise from this kingdom. That's how I know that the 10 kings come from that 4th kingdom. Okay, that's the proof for that right there. Another king, different from the previous ones, this is the Antichrist, will rise after them, so after the 10, okay, and subdue 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High and oppress the holy ones of the Most High. He will intend to change religious festivals and laws. Now, that's one I didn't put in your PowerPoint. You might want to add that as another note. The Antichrist will intend, that doesn't mean he does, it means he intends to change religious festivals and laws. And the holy ones will be handed over to him for times, and half a time. So that's 3.5 years. Now, if you've been listening to the whole series of where I explain time, and half a time, you will see in Revelation, in fact, I'm going to just show you. Let's go to Revelation real quick. I want to be able to prove this to you. So in Revelation chapter 12, it says in 3 places, 3.5 years, that the Antichrist will wear out, oppress, and kill the Christians, okay? So I'm going to show you those verses. At the end of chapter 12, verse 6, it says, the woman fled into the wilderness. There she had a place prepared by God to be nourished there for 1,260 days. Those ones being nourished, I believe, are the people in Judea that surround Judea, and they run to the mountains, okay? That's talked about in a different study that we did in Matthew 24. Okay, so then that's 1,260 days is exactly 3.5 years. Remember, you have to do it according to the Hebrew calendar. And then we're going to go Revelation chapter 12, verse 14 at the very end, where she was nourished, that same group of people that fled to the wilderness. Okay, they were nourished for time, times, and half a time. You see, that's the same wordage that we just got in Daniel. So time, that's 1 year. Times, that's 2 years. And half a time is half a year. So 3.5 years. Okay, now I'm going to take you right over to Revelation 13 and verse 5. The beast, so that's the Antichrist, was given a mouth to utter boasts and blasphemies. It was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. That's exactly 3.5 years. So we see that 3 times in Revelation right there. It began to speak blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his dwelling, those who dwell in heaven. Verse 7, and it was permitted to wage war against the saints and to conquer them. It was also given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. And you can keep on reading more if you'd like, but you can see right there, it says 3.5 years that the Antichrist will have authority. For 3.5 years. It says it 3 different ways. One is time, and half a time. One is the exact months, and one's the exact days. But it's the same time frame that we're talking about. So I wanted to show you how we're talking about the same exact time frame here in Daniel. Okay, so verse 26. But the court will convene, and his dominion will be taken away. It will be completely destroyed forever. Okay, so if we can look at the next PowerPoint. Is that that's the end? Okay. On mine, I have actually put that he will try to change religious festivals and laws, but I've told you to put a note to that. And then point 7 that I have is at Jesus' return, he will be destroyed forever. The Antichrist will be destroyed forever. So I'm just going to read that because it is good to hear. Because we're going to be very mistreated and killed by the Antichrist. So it's good to hear that our Savior is going to win. Okay, so I'm going to keep on reading. Verse 26. But the court will convene, and his dominion will be taken away. It will be completely destroyed forever. The kingdom, dominion, and greatness of the kingdoms under all heaven will be given to the people, the holy ones of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will serve and obey him. This is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts terrified me greatly, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. Okay. So now if you go to your handout that says put it all together that I started with in the beginning of the presentation, and I'm going to go over that again. And Mary, if you can show, perfect, exactly. So we're going to go back to this page here. We're just going to review everything that I just showed you from Scripture. And so we're just going to go over it again just for clarity's sake, okay? So
Ruth, can I ask one question?
Yes.
Get to the bottom because, and you may not be talking about that much in this presentation. Can you
Mm-hmm.
explain these other 2 things just very briefly? This and this, because we just talked about that.
Okay. I will do that when I get to the bottom, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So near the end of time, the Iranian area will rise to power 2 times. The second time will be greater than the first. That Iranian kingdom will push north, south, and west. No one will stop them for a time. However, a Western country will have its first king, an arrogant man who will become greater after destroying the Iranian power. The Iranian power is annihilated. Okay. From that kingdom, where there's that first king, there will come 4 powers that spread out over the whole earth. I'll call them regions, although maybe you can come up with a better word for that. In the place of this Western king, there will be 4 regions of power in the world. 7 kings will have authority. That's because the third kingdom has 4 kings. Okay? All right. the strongest region, that's the fourth kingdom. So the fourth kingdom will be the strongest one and the most terrifying. It will trample the whole earth. 10 rulers that are not yet kings at first will come from that fourth kingdom. From those 10 rulers will come the Antichrist. When he rises to power, 3 will be subdued. Those 10 kings, along with the Antichrist, will destroy a thing called Mystery Babylon, which at the time will be controlling the earth. They will expose and destroy of this whole evil system. This will make them look like good guys because it really is a truly evil system. The Antichrist then will rise, and he will be arrogant and ruthless, intriguing, having great understanding. He will be different than all the others, deceitful. He will oppress and wear out the Christians. Now, there are 2 people beside him. You have one on the left. That's the false prophet. You have probably heard about him. He's talked about in Revelation. So there will be 3 parts to who the Antichrist is. The Antichrist will be one man, but he will have another man that will come. He's called a false prophet, and he's going to cause the whole earth to bring glory to the Antichrist and worship to him. That's why you see him facing the Antichrist with his hands up like he's worshiping the Antichrist. The Antichrist will receive a wound that should kill him, and he will appear to raise from the dead. And then the false prophet will say for the whole earth to create images and to worship the image. And this is an image that the Antichrist is able to breathe the breath of life into. So the Antichrist will actually create life. And this image will actually be able to speak. And people will have to worship this image and take the mark of the beast, which you've heard about. Now, the next part of this series, we're going to get all into this, and I'm going to go verse by verse in Revelation about this. We're going to talk a lot more about these 3 in the next presentation. But just so that you know what those 3 down there are doing, that's what that is about. And the reason why that little stick figure doesn't have legs is because I'm not sure. It's called an image, not a he. It's called an it, and it might be a he, but it's some sort of strange thing that's never been before. It's some sort of image, okay, that's able to be given life. Some sort. I'm not sure what all that means, but that's what it says. Okay, so the Antichrist will be worshipped for raising from the dead. He'll have this head wound, this mortal head wound. He will seem like a savior, and he will rule for 3.5 years with total power over the entire earth. So it will be complete globalism, which is interesting that the world seems to be heading in that direction, and they're pushing for that a lot. And that is yet another sign that the time is getting close for us to see some of these things happen. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that this helped clarify any questions that you have. If you have any questions, ask questions below, leave comments. I know this is a lot to take in. It's a lot of information. I tried to slow my pace down this time. Hopefully I did, just to make it more able to be understood. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.